Hello everybody, and welcome to my first Inktober drawing for the month. My first ink drawing of October. Not the first one I actually did, because I did sneak one in at the end of November because I had just purchased my colored inks and I desperately wanted to try them out, but this was the first Inktober one that I'd recorded, I guess, and you didn't get to see all of it because I had started this one before I had even purchased this camera that I'm using right here. So I had gotten the Astronaut all inked in before I could even start recording for the first time. It was actually this astronaut here that made me decide to buy a camera, because I was like, this is gonna be cool. I should record it for posterity, or I guess the void, the way this is going. Welcome to my YouTube video for no one. But that's okay. I really like this astronaut. He turned out really cool. And the first half of this video is mostly just shading in this astronaut suit. It has a lot of little wrinkles and a lot of little folds, and I wanted to give a good suggestion of that throughout the piece. So there's a lot of just tiny additions of gray in this suit. If you want to jump right to when I start adding all the cool colors in the background, that should happen around 14:45 probably is the time. I'll put it up in the corner of the video here. 14:45 is when the colored background starts. But this is all gray stuff. I had never looked so closely at an astronaut suit before. I don't know if you guys have, but man, it is complicated. There are little doohickeys and gadgets everywhere. I assume to keep an astronaut alive in the vacuum of space. See, and the picture I was looking at, because I did use a photo reference from a stock photo website called Pixabay.com is where I found a photo of an astronaut to look at, because I couldn't have drawn this out of thin air, you guys. Look at all the doohickeys. I don't know all those doohickeys. I am not a rocket scientist of any sort. But in the original image that I looked at for drawing this astronaut, he was attached to a bunch of, I'm pointing at the screen like you guys can see me recording this, but he was attached at the feet of his suit with a bunch of metal gear and such. I assume to keep him from just such a scenario as I'm painting him in right now, which is drifting through space, untethered to the rest of the world. See, he's got his little swoopy tether coming off of his feet. That little clip would have been attached to the metal bits at his feet, but I didn't want him attached to anything. I wanted him definitely drifting through space aimlessly. And that's one of my favorite things I think about the finished piece, is you could flip it any way you really wanted to, upside down or sideways or at an angle if you really felt like it, because there's no real up frame of reference in space. You know, he could be drifting in any direction. Oh, you can see that lovely smear I made on accident. See, I accidentally put a big smear of dark paint in the corner and then didn't notice it right away until it was already dry. You see I could put a bunch of water over top of it, going, oh God, come out, I hope you're still wet, but it was dry. So there it stays for now. But that's okay, it'll blend into the background eventually. Ooh, the strap was interesting because the strap has tiny, tiny folds all along the entire strap. So you end up putting these little gray hatch marks all down the side of the strap just to suggest those little folds. And that's all I'm doing here is I go back in and I slowly darken the center of each fold to give it more dimensionality, I guess. Tonal contrast is maybe the official word, but this paper that I'm using here is actually just large. I don't know if this is even my mixed media paper or if this is just random sketch paper. I think it's my mixed media paper because my regular large sketch pad I don't think would have held up to this much water at all. And this one doesn't hold up incredibly well against, if you're going to be doing something in ink like this, using it like a watercolor like I tend to do, I would definitely recommend watercolor paper of some kind. Mixed media paper will work if you're careful, but it bows very easily if you put too much water down, and it tears a little easily. But this was before I bought my Arches hot press paper, which ended up being my absolute favorite paper. I love that paper. I use it for everything now. But the mixed media paper did well. It does well if you're careful with it and not too rough. But see, he's starting to get some nice shading going in there. He's starting to pop off the page a little more. It'll look even better once the background's in to contrast all of that white, but he's shaping up already. Shaping up pretty well. That's another thing with mixed media paper, or really with any paper when you're doing water application like this. I like to tape it down all around the edges. That way, if your paper bends and warps because you added too much water to it, if you leave it taped down until it's completely dry, then it should ideally dry flat. The ripples will work themselves out, which is super convenient for me because boy, did I get this page ripply when I go into the background. This is also a huge painting for what I should have been doing. Inktober is a thing where you're supposed to respond to a prompt every day and make a little ink drawing for every prompt every day of October. And I have never managed to do, this is my second Inktober, and as I'm recording this, Inktober is actually over. October is gone. I'm in November right now, so hello from the future, everybody. It's November. But, what do I think? Oh, it's huge. It's a huge painting. There's no way I could have done this. I didn't do this all in a day. I did this over the course of a few days. I will have to count up, but I spent hours doing this because it is so big and so detailed. And I have two more large Inktober drawings for the next few days after this that I had already created pencil sketches for, and I decided to finish them out. But then after that, all of my Inktober drawings are a little smaller, a little more reasonably sized because it was too much. You see in the corner there how I added way too much water in the corner there because I was trying to cover up that smear. Sometimes you get impatient and you gotta realize that as you build up layers, that smear will go away. You don't have to literally subsume it in a puddle of watery ink like I did. See there, you can see all the bowing in that paper. But I'll show you a picture at the end, a still of this drawing, and it dried very well. You know, as long as you make sure that your pooled ink doesn't settle really extremely on those low points, you know, make sure to spread that pigment around, or else it'll be really obvious what happened with your paper, that it bowed, and you just let color collect in the low points. But I got that worked out, and now it looks all smoky down there. I skipped a little bit because I think there was just some really boring stuff. Some pretty boring frames where I was just staring, pondering at this drawing. I do a lot of that as I go through. I just step back and stare at something, which I think is important because you get too focused on little things and then you step back and your proportion looks funny or a color value is wrong and you never even noticed because you were focused too closely. So step back every once in a while, give it a look, let everything dry in between layers. It looks different once it's dry. The colors look different. So it's important to not rush a process like this. There's those little straps on his leg. So many little straps and dongles. I mean, who knew? Who knew it was so hard being an astronaut? I think probably everybody, but I wouldn't have thought that getting dressed was such a difficult thing. But it would be. It would be. Look at that. I wouldn't want to get into that. How terrible. But I would to be in space. If I could float through space, I guess I would certainly suit up in an astronaut suit. Just for the experience, because who wouldn't? That sounds enormously fun. I gotta be close to the end of this suit stuff. I have a couple of blue highlights that I'll add at the end here, but so many little tiny shadows. Definitely, as you can see through this whole process, it works out best. There's my phone. What am I doing? But it works out best to start very, very light, like barely any color, just a little tiny bit of shadow. So that way you can map out where you want those wrinkles and you want those shadows before you go whole hog into the black. Whole hog. Is that a Midwestern thing? That seems like it should be. Guess where I'm from, you guys. But anyway, now I think we've got the blue ink out here. I adore this blue ink. I'm using Winsor & Newton inks for all of this, and I truly love the blue. It's such a gorgeous, vibrant color, generally. I'm using it very lightly here. I'm just adding some tone to my white spots here on my astronaut, because eventually there will be stars in this drawing, and I want those stars to be the only really white, like completely white thing in the entire drawing. So I'm toning down the white of my astronaut suit here with some very pale blue along the tops and the wrinkle folds, the top areas of the wrinkle folds. Anywhere I think it looks good, basically, I'm just throwing in a little bit of blue tone. Those feet still look so weird to me. Maybe it's because it's not attached to that metal frame, but if you've ever looked, astronaut suit feet, they look kind of like footy pajamas. They look like heavy-duty socks. They're just strange, I guess. I'd never really thought about astronaut footwear in my life, but I guess we arrive at the strangest things through the strangest channels. There's my blue some more. Get a little more blue, pop that corner up. I want that corner to pop out nice. That's, I assume, where his oxygen comes from, I think. I mean, I don't know. Correct me in the comments if you are an astrophysicist. Tell me all the things I got wrong about. I suppose you don't have to be an astrophysicist to be an astronaut, but I believe most of them are some sort of scientist, and I believe astrophysics just makes sense to me for an astronaut, but I guess they could be anything. I think I'm so into astrophysicists because of Stargate, SG-1. I loved Stargate when I was a kid, and I had a huge crush on Samantha Carter, played by Amanda Tapping. She was amazing. She was so cool. And I loved Stargate. So I guess that's where I have a bias towards astrophysicists, and that's why, I guess. Oh, finally we're getting into the background. The background is the most fun because that's where all of the colors came in. If you guys ever get a chance, you should paint a galaxy or a universe or a nebula, some sort of space thing, because it's really fun. It's really fun. There's no solid lines. There's no wrong choices. You just place some colors down in random swirly patterns and layer it up over time, and it just turns out into a cool galaxy. There's my blue. I do love that blue. It's so pretty. But it can't be all blue. We want our colored background to contrast the blue highlights that we've got going on our spacesuit. So it won't stay completely blue. Here's my purple, or I suppose violet. Violet is what this color is. It's also a very pretty color. These Winsor & Newton India inks are gorgeously vibrant. Just very vibrant and bold. Oh, is that some red? I mixed some red in with some purple, or I suppose scarlet in with some violet, if you want to be specific. And came up with this really gorgeous magenta color. I don't know why I think nebulas should be magenta, but it's a pretty strong association for me in my head for no reason whatsoever. So I go a little crazy with my magenta, but it's okay because it looks so cool. And right now it just looks like streams, like maybe I've got some Ghostbusters off screen trying to catch a ghost, but it will come together as we go in there with some contrasting black and then add in a few more layers of color. There's the black. You have to be very careful with your black inks because it is dark and it is very permanent. That's the thing with India inks, is once that ink is dry, it's not going anywhere. It's not like watercolors where you can keep it wet or lift it up after the fact. It is very, very permanent. So you have to work a little faster. This was one of my first ones, my first India ink drawing, so I am still getting used to how fast it dries. But this was a really good choice to get used to India ink because of how freeform the galaxy is. If you have any medium that you've never used before, I think a good first attempt is some sort of space thing because you can just mess around with it and have fun. Learn how your medium works. Learn what it likes and what it doesn't like. You should always get to know your medium. And I've fallen in love with you, India ink. You're so pretty. You're so vibrant. Look at that contrast. It's so nice. I am still not super great at very carefully with my brush outlining the very edge of things, like little delicate bits like the astronaut's glove or little corners like that. I always manage to go up where I don't quite want it to be. My hand tremors just a little bit, has just a little bit of a shake to it. So that's steady. I'm doing it in chunks, you can see. I found that made the galaxy blend together better if I did the areas directly next to the astronaut in small chunks so that I didn't get too overwhelmed with maintaining that clean edge on my astronaut suit. But here I am just adding some more black blobs right now, and I'm going to stop probably soon and add in a little more color. The trick to universes is to throw a bunch of cool blobs down and then let it dry, and then throw down another layer of cool blobs, making sure not to cover up the first layer entirely. Just layer, dry and layer a bunch of overlapping colors and dark spots, and pay attention to where your colors have naturally collected and become darker, and then darken those even more to add some real depth to your galaxy here. What a strange angle. This is such a strange angle to see this guy from. He's so flat looking. This was when I was still putting my camera on the table. I don't know if this would have been better from above, or if you guys like it from the side. You'll have to let me know. Let me know if you have a marked preference to the side view or the overview. But I guess you wouldn't know the overview yet. I have a drawing coming up. Subscribe if you want to see it. I have a drawing coming up of some sharks. It's a whole school of sharks along the Atlantic coast of Florida, as seen from above. You get the beach and the water and all the little sharks. It was lovely, but it was the first video. It's the first video I recorded from an up above angle. So look forward to that, I guess, if you really hate these side view angles. There's some more blue added in there, just some darker colors. Once you know where your colors are going to be and how you want it to look, you can really go in with some strong pigments, some really strong pigments, and just throw it in there. But definitely let it dry in between layers, or you'll end up with much muddier colors than you want. See how you can also fade colors into the same area of wetness that creates a sort of wash for your galaxy. You want to avoid sharp lines in a drawing, like in a painting like this with the galaxy. You want to avoid harsh lines where your paint dried and then you started with new paint. Try and overlap those harsh lines with your new color splotches. It'll give the illusion that you're falling into space. You'll have some more cool value contrast. Just adding my splotches, leaving it dry and adding more splotches. I was going nuts with this India ink at this point, having some fun. Always have fun with your new mediums. If a new medium isn't fun, I don't know, keep trying, I guess. Some things aren't fun right away. Some things get fun with practice. Just throwing in some blue. You gotta be careful with where you put your black ink initially, because you can't put colored ink over the black ink and expect it to pop really well. It'll be very dark. That black ink is much more, it has a higher opacity. You can't see through it as much as you can some of these colored inks. Some of these colored inks, you put cool layers down and then you add another color over top of it and you can still see the tone of the previous layer through the ink. But not so with black. Not so with black. Black is hard to see things through. So be careful. Put it in sparingly initially, and then once you're sure where you want it, then add it in. Oh, I'm adding in some red, some straight red there. Scarlet. That bowing in that corner, that messes with me. That's so terrible looking. I'm so glad it dried flat. It's kind of a miracle the way that paper will dry flat if you tape it very firmly to something hard before you start adding water to it. So that's my favorite trick for this video, is definitely tape down your paper and all of that bowing will disappear as it dries, like magic. Adding in some more colors. The galaxies, you just keep working at it until it looks how you want it to look. It's easy to overwork because it's something like this. It's such a busy background that you could just go for it and go for it and go for it forever and never be done. But At this point, I had been working on this astronaut for many hours, and I was certainly ready to get a move on. Here I'm adding in some more contrast. See, there was too much color directly in front of his visor, and his visor is going to be sort of a low-key focal point. So I didn't want too much color competition for that visor, so I darkened it up there a little bit. And there is I drew an outline of my astronaut, and then cut him out and threw it over there so he didn't get any stars on him. And here's where I start splattering. This is such a fun part. I had basically just I mixed a little bit of my white India ink, which is very see-through, with some white acrylic, which is not see-through. So it made it liquidy enough to splatter well, but it kept the paint dark enough to have good visibility. Oh, looks like I got a clip switched around there. Oh, it's okay. It's just a little switched around. You get to see more stars come into being. That big brush, I used that big brush because it was such a big piece and I wanted to just get splattering. But be careful with loading up a large brush like that to do star splatters in this way, because it's very easy, especially if your star material is a little too liquidy, it's very easy to get big splotchy stars that you don't really want in your background, unless you're next to a star. If you're right next to a star, that would be a pretty big one, but these little distant stars didn't need to be that big. Oh, started the visor now. These rings. I almost wish I had left the visor in its more vibrant form. You'll see here about midway through, because I got some really interesting color shifts in the rings that I really liked. I got some really vibrant. I've been using red and yellow so far in this visor, and if you'll notice, aside from some red in my background, which I mostly went towards like a cool magenta tone, I wanted to really keep the warm reds and the warm yellows just for this visor at the end, to help it pop out from the rest of the piece. Everything else is a little bit of a cool tone, and this is where I've been saving this space right here for my warm tone, for this reflection in this visor. Just carefully putting in some lines here. See, I'm offsetting my lines that I'm putting in so that I can get them how I want them and then let them dry before I go back in and fill in those white areas with a new set of lines. That's how I created the crisper look of, delineated sections of that planet. Because I didn't want it to blend together too much. I wanted it to look like a swirly, stripy planet. Some yellow. Oh, that's the actual ring. That's the actual ring there. And it's so bright. It's so bright initially, and I love it, but I really wanted this to be a subtle reflection in his visor. So I do end up toning it down quite a bit for the finished copy. And here I am putting in my second set of rings. Those are nice and dry, for the most part, I should hope. I don't know, sometimes I get impatient. They might not be completely dry. And you'll see here and there my paper towel. As long as something is still wet, you can blot away the excess with a paper towel or a Q-tip or a rag. I have all three of those things generally on hand. Now see with this black here, I'm trying to shade this planet a little bit, give it some shading toward the back and toward the front. I want it to look a little rounder and less flat. But, it looks flat anyways, because it's in this visor. But the shading does help. I did lose a little bit of the ring texture. Some of the cool ring tones and contrasts I did lose as I was shading. But I'll try and bring them up here in a little while too. You can only add so many layers, I've found, to an India ink drawing before it just doesn't work quite as well as you want it to anymore. It doesn't show up as well. Which is different from acrylic, which is another medium that I had used before this. Acrylic is great because you can just add things. You can just keep adding stuff. But India ink has been a special beast for me, but I've enjoyed working with it. Add some black deep into the back of that visor. There, it's starting to look a little cooler now. Oh, I should have left that little white. That would have been great. This visor is actually where I discovered the limits of white India ink. It's a lot like white watercolors. It's just very, very see-through. You have to add something to it in order to get it to be a bright, clear white color for highlights and the like. But I didn't know that at this point here. You're gonna watch me discover that together with me here at the end. I'm just working on my rings. I want my rings to be shaded too, because part of it's blocked out by the planet and part of it's faded in as it curves into the visor. It's a strange angle too. This is why I have decided to switch from these side angles to a more up above angle. It's just it's a more accurate representation of the piece, I think. This is such a strange angle that it's hard to see the real curve that I'm going for here with these shadows. Oh no! I smeared the India ink and it smeared the entire focus of the camera, and now it's blurry. Oh, here I am trying with my white India ink, creating a little highlight here. It works a little bit. For what I needed it there on the interior of the visor. It just didn't work as well as I liked for my reflection. Oh, that is so blurry. Focus. No, that's okay. We're almost done anyway. And then you'll get to see a nice big still picture. Oh, where added in some definition to that ring. I want to draw a big ringed planet, but I mean like a big ring planet. I want to draw a big ring planet so that you can see the individual little asteroids. They're not meteors if they're not falling into the planet, correct? They're asteroids. All the little asteroids that make up those cool planet rings, I would love to paint out, because right now they're just streaks. There it is, though. There's my final completed astronaut drawing. It did turn out well. See all those folds left at the bottom? They're not there anymore. It dried nice and flat, just like I wanted it to. And it looks great. The galaxy turned out well. The stars are really what make these paint smears, these color smears, look like a galaxy. And it turned out well. Thank you for hanging out with me for a little while, and thank you for watching my video. If you liked it, you can go ahead and subscribe and like it, all that stuff. You know what to do. You're a savvy YouTuber. But anyways, thank you. It was nice talking to you, I guess. Goodbye. Have a nice night. Goodbye.